Good morning, Neil. Sean here at the very heart of London. Listen, thank you so much as ever for joining me for the history on this day. I can't believe that you all know this stuff. You all look way too young. Yes, you, I'm talking to you. I've seen some of those thumbnail pictures. Yes, I'm not sure whether you're being honest on... I know, I love it, don't you? You know when you put an older picture up and people say, is that you? And you think, yes. And then you go off and think, how old do they think I look now? We've all had that moment, haven't we? Back as ever though to your breaking stories of what happened on this day. Well, on this day actually it was a really big day in the world of Hollywood because it was the day that Doris Day signed on, or agreed the deal at least, to star in a movie that would change her career once again. She'd already had huge success for years with the likes of Calamity Jane and many other big movies. But it was this one, Move Over Darling, which came out in 1963. Well, she signed on the deal, well, just late 62. It was interesting really because it was a remake of a 1940s movie from Cary Grant called My Favourite Wife. Now, 20th Century Fox had been remaking this movie with Dean Martin and Marilyn Monroe called Something's Got to Give. And in fact, Doris Day, in order for Fox to save money because they were losing so much money with Cleopatra and Elizabeth Taylor, they basically just said, well, you could wear Marilyn's old costumes, even though sadly Marilyn had passed away at this point. Nothing like love in show business, is there? I don't mean that rudely, but you do kind of think, wow, you know. But of course, that particular movie came on to become a very big success, all thanks to the debonair charm also of her co-star James Gardner, and the #1 worldwide single, oh come on, you know it, Move Over Darling. But what else happened on this day in history? 1933, it was the very first televised boxing match. And it was interesting, I was talking about this with a brand new boxer of the day, Tyson Fury, recently, and he was sort of saying how he's seen a resurgence in the last few years because boxing has gone in and out of fashion. But it was on this day, as I say, 1933, that a 6-round exhibition at Broadcasting House in Regent Street, London, between the middleweights Archie Sexton and Laurie Rattery aired by BBC TV. And it's interesting, it was just a test obviously, but people loved it so much that they thought, actually, we've got a bit of a ratings hit here. Now in 1946 on this day, if you were queuing outside the Regal, the Gaumont, the Cannon, whichever cinema that you went to locally, then you would have been possibly queuing up to see this movie. It was directed by Howard Hawks and it starred the brilliant Humphrey Bogart as Philip Marlowe and his then wife, Lauren Bacall. Big premiere, and Lauren Bacall of course went on to have a phenomenal career. In fact, at one point she was almost engaged to Frank Sinatra, but apparently, according to Frank, that was just a figment of Miss Bacall's imagination. I think many people have been engaged to Frank Sinatra when you look through the Hollywood history, don't you? Now in 1974, the ex-Beatle John Lennon was living in New York City with his wife Yoko Ono. And he called the police and a few other people because he claimed on this day in 1974 that he'd spotted a UFO flying over NYC. Now, a lot of people speculated that this was rather convenient because he had some new music coming out, and more importantly, he was kind of well known for dabbling in other things of that particular era. But they did take it seriously for a little while, and who's to say whether John Lennon didn't see a UFO or not? Now in 1932, a lady who truly should be celebrated, Amelia Earhart, became the very first woman to fly across the United States non-stop from Los Angeles to Newark, New Jersey. She's still obviously recognised and read about in the history books. I just find it amazing with these people, don't you? They did so much in a time when they had so little. I mean, how terrifying would it have been to fly all that way in the sort of planes that they had in those days? I think it's incredibly brave, quite honestly. This day, 1985, did you believe in the power of love? Oh yes, well a lot of people did because this became a million seller plus around the world. It was the #1 big hit single of that particular period in 1985 by, do you remember them? Huey Lewis and the News. Finally, in 1875, Captain Matthew Webb was the very first person to swim the English Channel without a life jacket, you know, anything to save his life. He did it just single-handedly through sheer hard graft and swimming. When he got over to the other side, he became an international hero, and he was kind of like the biggest celebrity you could possibly imagine. Oh yes, his picture was placed onto matches because obviously he was seen as something of a macho hero. Women swooned when he did personal appearances. Obviously, Captain Matthew Webb was the very biggest thing that you could possibly think of. And then of course he was eclipsed by someone else taking over his record. But for that moment in 1875, you simply could not move without seeing pictures in newspapers, the early edition magazines, and as they say, on beer mats, beer bottles. Everybody wanted a slice of Captain Matthew Webb, proving that being an influencer, social media mover, whichever you want to call it, if you're big, you're hot, and you can sell things, then they definitely do want you. You're up to date with everything that happened on this day, and as ever, will I see you tomorrow? Neil Sean in the very heart of London.